Unfortunately, not every 5-star is created equal. While some are absolute meta legends, which will always be worth your time, others may not be gifted such a privilege. So today, I thought it'd be fun to rank the top 5 worst limited 5-stars in Genshin Impact to help you budget your primos more wisely. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Some quick conditions. 5 is going to be the least bad, with 1 being the total worst limited 5-star. I'm going to count characters on the Chronicled Wish as limited if they are not available on the standard banner, so units such as Eula, Albedo, and Klee will be viable for potential appearance in this video. We will not be discussing any standard 5-star characters for obvious reasons. I'll be assuming relatively realistic investment levels, so C0 to C2 with an R1 Sig at most. Constellations and signature weapon refinements beyond that won't be considered. Aloy is not a limited 5-star. By technicality, sure, she was limited time, but you can't get her anymore. She is a pretty awful unit though, yeah. Alright, cool, let's go. With number 5, I'd actually like to start off with a pretty interesting one, that being Cyno, because his damage isn't even that bad. His DPS in his best in slot team is actually pretty good. His multi-wave is awful! Whenever you've killed the current enemies and you want to move on to the next one, you will probably still have duration left on Cyno's burst. You will be forced to cut the duration short and swap back to Nahida so that you can apply new Dendromarks onto the next enemies. Sure, his single target performance is pretty good, but the thing is, there are way more units who can do what he does way better for way less investment, and that's another key problem with him, how much it costs to make him perform at the level he does. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with a non-free-to-play friendly 5-star. Not every single 5-star needs to be super accessible, super this and that, as long as their cost is justified. That is the most important thing. Xiao is a really expensive 5-star in my opinion. You want C6 Farazan, you want really expensive teammates for him, you want a 5-star weapon, otherwise he is not going to feel that good. But once you get all these things, he feels like a really good carry. I would argue that Cyno has about the same 5-star cost as him, while performing so much less. Another major issue I have with Cyno is the fact that if you don't have any one member of his best 5-star team, he's gonna feel infinitely worse. I'd say with Xiao, you can make some reasonable substitutes and he won't feel too bad. Each teammate is catering to his obnoxiously long uptime. Farina's 3 little guys, Farina's burst, Baiju's burst, Nahida's Dendromarks, Nahida's burst. You get the idea. These all last really long. Most substitutes are not even going to last half of Cyno's burst duration. So you're basically locked into one team option with him that feels subpar compared to modern Fontanian DPSs, despite the absurd cost of it. Not to mention the ridiculous gameplay issues. All the supports in his team are pretty much always better used anywhere else. I don't want to move on from Cyno without talking about King of Hell, which is a team that a friend of mine introduced me to. It might look like nonsense, but hear me out. The main pro of it is that the setup is 2 times faster than Quick Bloom. It retains the very free movement that Quick Bloom has, while also allowing your damage to not totally fall off of a cliff after killing the first wave, because it's actually a decent multi-wave team for Cyno. If you're somebody with a high investment Cyno like C2+, don't sleep on this team. I would actually recommend that you give it a shot. It's surprisingly good for him. The drop-off in damage whenever you lose Nahida's mark is even more noticeable if you have C2, because then when you go from having Nahida's C2 buff to not, you'll notice the drop-off in DPS pretty quickly, whereas you don't have to deal with that with the King of Hell team. So yes, while Cyno does indeed suck as a 5-star, I did want to point out this little ray of hope for him, and because his damage is not the worst thing in the world, that's why he's only at number 5 on this list. But you're not getting the best bang for your primo by going for this guy in the current day and age. Then we move on to number 4, Yoimiya. It is a simple case of power creep, honestly. I don't really even have a problem with the fact that she's single target, because the Abyss is even more boss-centric than it was before, and if it's not a boss, then it's usually only 2 target or 3 target at most, so that's not really my issue here. It's more so that her damage just does not compete with current day Fontanian DPSs. When you take a look at her closest competition in the past, that being Hu Tao, she has long since surpassed Yoimiya thanks to Shanyon Plunge, and even now, we have better pyro DPSs in Linny and Orlakino. And with Mavu Ika coming up, yeah, I don't think there's any point in pulling for Yoimiya anymore. She's serviceable, put her in a decent team, she will clear the Abyss for you. It's not a clearing issue, it's simply that others will do it way faster and way better than her. One of her biggest selling points before was the fact that she's super easy to play. However, I don't really think that this matters anymore because we have other really easy to play DPSs who are at the very top, such as Nervalette and Arlecchino. Those are not hard units to pilot, and they will do like 10 times the damage of Yoimiya at the very least. Her competition is simply too large, and there is no reason to go for what Yoimiya specifically offers, because she doesn't really have anything about her that's too special. I do think that she plays excellently on an iPad or a phone. Like, fair enough, she is a really nice mobile unit, but if we're looking at it from a meta perspective, pretty much any of her DPS is going to be stronger. It's a simple case of power creep. Her teams haven't been updated ever since Yelan and Yunjin came out, and that's fine. She had her time, she was a decent option for quite a while. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that she's fallen off. There's not really much else to comment on when it comes to Yoimiya. It really is just a case of, oh no, she doesn't really do damage anymore. Her competition is super large. I think another issue is also that her vertical investment is just awful. It feels like there is barely any difference between a C0 to C2 Yoimiya. Any Dolphin Yoimiya players, feel free to correct me down below in the comments. But there's not really much you can do with Yoimiya to make her feel on par with modern units. At least with most of her characters, their high investment can kind of save them, but not really for her. Unfortunately, for all these reasons, she is one of the worst limited 5 stars in the game. I've already made a video where I talked about the problems of Albedo at length, but to briefly summarize, he lost all of his major use cases. There was Ito, there was Xiao, and there was Hu Tao. Hu Tao's teams look totally different now, Xiao has gotten many upgrades, his teams are totally different now, and you would rather use Chiori in Ito teams because Chiori carries him so hard. He never really got upgraded with the times, and while his constellations do help him out a decent bit, they're not enough to make him anywhere near worth getting compared to modern units. It doesn't help that his best in slot weapon is an event 4-star that nobody can get anymore. We might see the return of event weapon soon, considering that Honkai Star Rail recently added a reliable way to get old event-like cones, but I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for this change. The most obvious reason as to why Albedo got killed was Chiori. She is basically just him, but better, him, but a lot more damage and whatnot. Anywhere that you put Albedo, Chiori is going to do better. And that's not all, because while she was indeed the final nail in the coffin, after all, he got sentenced to the Chronicled Wish after that. Hoyoverse has totally given up on the guy. They decided to dump a whole mountain of salt onto the wound with Kachina. Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City, anyone? I have glazed that artifact set so many times. I think we all get why it's good by this stage. And come on, I don't even have to say why Shilonen makes this all even worse. There is genuinely no reason as to why you would want to use him anymore unless you really love him, because there is a replacement for every potential use case that he may have had. Chiori for Mono Geo, Shilonen for everything, and Kachina for everything. Also, while I don't want to kick a man while he's down, dude, his damage is pants. Listen, I really do love this character, but there is no denying that there is literally no reason to get him anymore. Also, Hoyoverse, I am begging you to add a skin where he can look more like this. This is so cool. This is not that. Then we move on to a character that is so astronomically horrible that neither me or any of my friends have her, so please bear with me in regards to the footage, will you? Sigewinne is nothing short of absolutely garbage. Like, this is a terrible character. Now, I won't say that she has 0 uses. I will say her saving grace is Farina Mono Hydro, especially at C2 when she's able to decrease Hydro Res for the whole team. Now, as your friendly local C6 Farina main, I will say that I wouldn't go for C2 Sigewinne as your first point of vertical investment. Go for C2 Xianyun first, or even just Xianyun in general so that you can play Vape Plunge. There's also C2 Shilonen, but do keep in mind that Farina already gives herself so much damage bonus percent and so much HP percent from her C2 that I would rather go for Vape Plunge with Xianyun first. Okay, that's enough whale talk, but that's the thing. The only time I can realistically see somebody wanting Sigewinne is to get her C2 for C6 Farina Mono Hydro teams, or just for Farina Mono Hydro teams in general. There is no other use case where you would realistically want to have her. Yes, her team with Farina and Fischl buffing up their little summons is not half bad, and her Mono Hydro team is not half bad, but there are lots of replacements there that can do better than her. Don't even get me started on C0. C0 just doesn't do anything. She has the weird Bond of Life passive that... who was this made for? She also has some weird restrictions in her kit, like why can't she proc Yelan during her burst? Yes, it is a pretty short burst, and she does fit in during Yelan's downtime, but with that being said, Why? It's such a random restriction. She is an excellent Farina healer, but we have so many good Farina healer choices, there's no reason to go for Sigewinne specifically. And you could say, oh, but I really like Monohydro. I personally think that Kokomi is a lot more comfortable because her field time is way longer. Kokomi adds some structure to the team and helps create a sense of consistency. So yeah, Sigewinne is pretty much very outclassed by Kokomi, and while her C2 does hold some merit, there is pretty much almost always a better vertical investment option that you could go for if you're a C6 Farina main, and if you've got a C0 Farina, then the best vertical investment for you would be to pour all your Primo Gems into more Farina copies. Also, on the date that this video is being posted, it's Farina's birthday. Everybody comments happy birthday to Farina. Then we move on to number 1, the worst limited 5-star in all of Genshin Impact. So bad that even Hoyoverse themselves knows how bad she is, therefore they didn't rerun her for a century. Eula. Unfortunately, it is once again not only even a case of power creep, but also gameplay issues. She has it all when it comes to negative qualities. Let's get the obvious out of the way first, her damage. Now, I know that on the surface it might seem pretty good because she does that one big nuke, but it takes a really long time to get to said nuke, and the damage you do leading up to that isn't really all that impressive. And honestly, there are plenty of characters who can deal the damage of that nuke in a way shorter period of time, even if the individual numbers you see are smaller, they add up pretty quickly. But I'm just stating the obvious at this stage. We know that Fontaine happened, we know that Fontaine DPSs are crazy, and to be honest, Natlan seems to be having a pretty good track record so far with its DPS characters and supports, cause Shilonet is nuts. But what's even more damning is that Eula did get buffed, yet even that wasn't enough to save her, and it was a pretty significant buff. Remember Mika? He wasn't really that much of an upgrade over C6 Rosaria in Eula's best in slot teams before. But because he's a viable Farina healer, and he does provide some pretty good buffs to physical to be fair, Eula was able to use Farina in her teams, and that was a massive boost to them, yet her damage still wasn't good enough to really compete. It did make Eula's damage better, don't get me wrong, it gave her a new best in slot team, yet that did not save her by any means. Farina is better used in pretty much any other team, and so is Mika, honestly. Her gameplay issues are pretty bad. I don't think you should have to reset constantly with a character when most other characters don't have said issue. That is mostly a Eula problem. Now, Eula can still clear the Abyss, don't get it twisted. She's not like, oh wow, she's so horrible that she can't even clear. She can still clear. Hoyoverse would never release a unit that could not clear at some stage. She did get buffed after all, she can still meet the requirements if you play her well. But there is no denying that playing pretty much any other modern unit would offer you a much cleaner gameplay experience, and you would clear a lot faster because power levels have simply risen. I think you could argue that Sigewinne is worse than Eula, but the reason why I'm putting Eula below her is because I do think that Sigewinne does at least have that C2, and she does at least have that Monohydro team and that Farina official team, because those are decent teams. Whereas with Eula, it feels pretty wasteful to play her. You'd rather play Raiden anywhere else. You'd rather play Farina plus Mika anywhere else. Like, for example, Riesli teams. Remove Eula, put Xingqiu or Yolan there instead, and just have Raiden as the double Hydro driver. You'll do infinitely more damage. Now don't get it twisted, I do love Eula as a character. I dumped 60 wishes on the Chronicled Wish banner back when she was there, and I didn't even proc a 5-star. Really hoping that banner comes back soon, both so that my pity doesn't freaking reset on it, and so that I can get my Eula. So I do like this character. Yet even so, man, she sucks. I really think that physical should receive some really broken buff like Death Ignore, because while that sounds unbalanced on paper, let's not pretend like Eula doesn't need the help. She really does. You know she's cooked when freaking C6 Fremine is a better unit than her. Now listen, if you like any of the 5-stars that I mentioned in this video, that is completely fine. I still play Ganyu and Venti in 2024 because I like them. Naturally, play who you like. That's what this game's all about. It is about having fun, and if you don't enjoy playing the top meta units, nothing wrong with that, not at all. I just thought this would be a fun discussion to have. Especially because my opinions have changed over time. For example, Ayato would have easily made it into this video in the past, but not anymore. Perhaps you agree with my list, perhaps you think it's totally dumb. Both are fine. Either way, let me know what you thought of my top 5, and tell me your personal top 5 worst limited 5-stars down below in the comments. Hopefully this video was able to tell you who the worst limited 5-stars in Genshin Impact are. this has been Juice, signing out, and let's be honest, Aloy would have easily been the worst 5-star if she qualified for this video.